I was going to take the day off today. That changed when I was followed on Twitter by Rawhide Boys Ranch. Who's that? Well, I went to their timeline and followed them back, and I visited their website, and I watched one of their videos there and discovered that Bart Starr is one of the co-founders of that organization. Now, don't worry, this is not a commercial for the Rawhide Boys Ranch, although I'm sure they're doing a good work, and I'm sure it's impacting the lives of many young men. But Bart Starr has impacted the life of one young man long before he ever got involved with Rawhide Boys Ranch. I was that young man. As quarterback of the legendary Green Bay Packers, Bart Starr became an NFL legend. I could devote another hour documenting his athletic achievements here, and it would not even begin to scratch the surface. I was 9 years old, and I wrote a letter to the Green Bay Packers asking for Bart's autograph. What I got back was an 8x10 black and white photo signed at the bottom, "Best wishes, Bart Starr." It was a photo of Bart in a pose, but not throwing the football, but instead punting. The great quarterback's official team photo in a punting pose? I don't know, but I suspect I know why today. Back in the late 1960s, I competed in the annual punt, pass, and kick competition. It's simple. They stretch out a tape and you throw the football, and they mark where it lands, and then they measure off how far off the center line tape you are and deduct that from the length to arrive at the net distance, taking into account the error off the center line. Same thing is done for punting and kicking. I remember you kind of signed up for the competition at the local Ford dealership in town. They were the sponsor. And when you signed up, you were given this little booklet. It was kind of a comic book, but it had a heavy stock cover, and it wasn't paper stock. It was regular heavy, glossy stock. But the graphics inside and the writing and all that was kind of like a comic book. Various NFL greats telling their story. It was a real inspiration. Well, I won a third place trophy in my first year of competition. Not good enough. So I immediately began to prepare to do better the next year. I would rob my mother's tape, the paper from the adding machine that was in a roll, and I would stretch that thing out, and I marked it every foot, and then I would roll that thing out in the backyard, and I would practice. Well, my practice would be interrupted because one April day, I broke my femur. That's your thigh bone, folks. Broke it pretty badly. I spent 3 weeks in traction in a hospital, followed by 8 weeks in a body cast that extended from my nipples down to the toes of the broken leg, and halfway down the other leg, and a broomstick welded into place between the two. I was totally immobilized and could do nothing for myself. Well, finally the day arrived for the cast to be removed, and after it was sawed off, took a while. They wheelchaired me to the car and put me in, and I couldn't wait to get home. And man, when we got home, I threw that back door of that car open and took my first real step since April. I fell and collapsed to the concrete floor in a splat. I cried Not from the pain, from the despair. My little legs had not been used in almost 3 months. The muscles completely atrophied. I wanted so bad to compete in punt, pass, and kick to improve on that third place finish from last year. Well, I guess in sympathy or doing their due diligence, my parents took me to the doctor to talk about any therapy options that might be available. Well, the doctor, whose son, by the way, took second place the previous year, told me that a reasonable goal would be that I would be able to walk without crutches and be a spectator at the next punt, pass, and kick. Well, my parents took me home and helped me to the couch, and they turned on the TV. And beside me on that couch was that little punt, pass, and kick booklet. Bart Starr was one of the contributing authors. And I read his story for the zillionth time, I guess. Bart recalled how, instead of his quarterbacking skills, he recalled about his days as a punter at Alabama. He wrote about the darkness and the depression and the hopelessness that gripped him after a bad punt. And as the story kind of unfolded, he told how he realized that he was holding himself back. I remember the exact words that he used: wallowing in my own self-pity. Well, I picked up the football that was always at my side, and I began imagining myself being Bart Starr. And I would go through the motions of throwing that pass, and I could, in my mind, hear the crowd roaring. I didn't actually throw the football. I was inside. I asked my parents to take me outside so I could actually throw the football. Well, they did, and I sat there on the grass, and I did my best. I'd throw the ball, and I remember asking my mother to go get another one of those adding machine tapes. That's what they were back then, folks, adding machines. And mark it off every foot because I wanted to measure my progress. And hour after hour and day after day, I practiced. And while I was throwing, I would kind of move my legs around as best I could. Gosh, that must have looked funny. One day when I knew that no one was looking, I decided to try to stand on my own. And I remember being doubled over and using that football as something to push up on. And I was able to stand. There I stood holding my football. And I remember I tried to punt the ball. Well, it just kind of rolled off my foot, about 5 yards worth. But I was still standing. Day after day, I struggled. The pain was, intense. But the idea of giving up was even more intense. I would imagine in my fantasies that Bart Starr was standing right beside me, coaching me, telling me not to wallow in my own self-pity. Well, the failures became less frequent. I'll shorten the story. I didn't walk to that year's punt, pass, and kick competition to be a spectator. I took second place. It's the only second place finish I've ever been proud of. Well, that turned out to be the final year for punt, pass, and kick in our little community. The next year would see the desegregation of public schools, and no sponsor could be found. Today, Bart Starr is involved in a ministry to help young men. He may never know the difference he made in this young man's life. Thank you, Bart. You'll always be my hero. Those are my thoughts. If you have any, would you mind leaving your comments in the space provided on this page? You can connect with me on Twitter. I'm at DataGenesis. And the talking point notes for this blog can be found at that address right up there. And I do these blogs, these videos, in hopes to inspire you and share stories of inspiration, some from Scripture, some from just life. And there are others that do what I do, and if you would like to find more inspirational videos, I hope that you'll subscribe to this YouTube channel.